Hello, fellow creatives, and welcome to the Summer Creative Retreat. My name is Selina, and I'm a watercolor artist from Bulgaria. Over the past 5 years, I have dedicated myself to painting, and I also teach watercolor painting online. Today, we will paint a serene and stunning scene together. In this session, you will learn techniques for achieving smooth color transitions, capturing reflections, and mixing pastel shades. Before we begin, let me demonstrate different versions of this painting. I completed all of this in a single afternoon to show you how the results can vary based on the colors you use. For instance, this one is more vibrant and saturated, while this one has a moodier feel. I also painted one with pastel colors, which creates a pleasing atmosphere. Today we will recreate the pastel version, allowing you to learn how to mix your own pastel colors. To assist you, I've prepared a color palette guide with various color combinations. On the left, you'll find three main colors, and on the right, you can see the resulting hues. This guide can be used not only for today's painting, but also for future sunset theme projects. You can locate this guide in the bonus bundle along with the names of the colors. Feel free to refer to it and even experiment with your own color combinations. For today's painting, we'll use the following combination: yellow ochre, opera rose, and ultramarine, but as I mentioned, I'll show you how you can make pastel shades out of these. Now let's move on to the materials I'll be using today. I have two sheets of paper, roughly the size of a half A4. However, you can choose a size that you feel comfortable with. The scenery is quite minimalistic, so even a smaller size will look good. I'll use one of the sheets for swatching my colors before applying them. This is 100% cotton paper, which is perfect for smooth blends. But if you don't have it, you can definitely try with cellulose paper too. To secure my paper, I'll tape it to this cutting mat using paper tape. As for brushes, I'll be using synthetic brushes by Chamonix Art. First, I'll use this big soft quill to wet my paper, and for painting the gradient. For achieving smooth washes, we need a brush with soft hair. This one is synthetic squirrel, so find your biggest and softest brush for that. And for the details, I will use round brushes, sizes 4 and 2. You will need at least one smaller brush with a sharp tip. Next are the paints. I will use these four colors by Art Philosophy, as I mentioned, yellow ochre, opera and ultramarine, and I added permanent brown, which will help us to achieve darker mixes. You can use whatever brown you have or Payne's gray instead. And for mixing pastel colors, you will need some white gouache. I will mix my paints on this ceramic palette. I'll keep it here on the side together with my 2 jars of water and my cotton towel. You can also use a paper towel instead. And lastly, you will need a pencil and a ruler for the sketch. So let's get started. I'll proceed by taping my paper to the board. I'm covering approximately 5 mm of the paper or even more. This will create a nice white border around our painting when we remove it later. Next, we'll do a simple sketch. I'll draw the horizontal line where the sky and water meet, placing it roughly 1/3 of the way up the paper, maybe even higher. In the middle, we have our island. Remember, it should not be too large since it's in the distance. Keeping it smaller will provide a more realistic look. We also have two other mountains or islands on the sides. That's all for the sketch. The next step is wetting the paper. I'll take my large brush and thoroughly wet the entire sheet of paper. Ensuring your paper is well watered is crucial for achieving smooth transitions and gentle blends between colors. The paper needs to absorb the water, keeping it wet for a longer duration, allowing us to work with it for an extended period. Another tip is to angle your paper. This is where the paper tape comes in handy once again. Place it below the board, creating a slight slope. This will cause the water and paint to flow downward, creating natural color blends. While the paper absorbs the water, I'll squeeze the paints onto my palette. I start by squeezing a small amount from each color onto my palette. I place the yellow and pink closer together because they will be frequently mixed. Remember to add a little bit of white gouache next to each color, except for the brown. To ensure the paper surface is evenly moistened, I apply clean water once again. Using my soft quill brush, I add some water to the yellow ochre and a touch of white gouache. For a more saturated painting, use the color without adding too much water. It will have a bolder appearance. Feel free to experiment with the water to paint ratio before applying the color to your painting. With my yellow mixture, I mix on both brush strokes, starting from about the middle of the paper and dragging the color down. I leave a small portion of the paper uncovered. There we'll have our blue color, and we don't want to risk getting green when it mixes with the yellow. I drag some of the color up now, again leaving a white stripe at the top. I wipe the liquid that has gathered on the sides. I don't want it to get back to my painting. Now let's repeat the process with the pink. Opera Rose is a very bright and bold color. When you add white gouache to it, it becomes softer and more gentle. To create a peachy hue, mix in some yellow ochre. The more yellow you add, the more orangey it becomes. Apply the mixture, leaving a gap between the pink and the concentrated yellow. Also, add some in the water. I drag it a little bit above the horizon line. It will help me to create a misty effect. I'm washing my brush in clean water and I'm drying it on my towel, and I use the damp brush to gently blend the colors. I drag it from side to side, applying very little pressure, and I move it up and down to create a seamless blend. I try to leave the transparent stripe between the pink and the yellow. It makes for a nice glow in the sky. I wipe the paper tape again. It's time to incorporate blue into the painting. I add water to the ultramarine and I mix in some white gouache. This mixture will result in a pretty lavender color. Apply this mixture to the upper part of the sky and the area below. You can also mix a lilac shade for a more soft transition between the colors. I'm adding some of the ochre to the mixture and I apply it here. I wash my brush again, I dry it on my towel and I'll blend the colors together. If you want darker and more muted color, you can add some of the brown or Payne's Gray to this mix. Apply it at the very edge of the paper. Now here's a trick for achieving smooth blends. I'll take my board and tilt it in this direction. I'm wiping off the paint that has gathered on the sides. You can tilt your board in different directions to encourage the colors to flow and mix. Some final touches with a clean down brush to make sure everything is smoothly blended together. Be careful not to drag too much blue or purple into the yellow part. I'm pretty happy with how this looks, so I'll leave it like that. Next, I'm switching to my round size 4 brush. I mix some more of that peachy color, this time a more concentrated version with less water. I dab the excess on my paper towel and I'll add some distant mountains. Try that first in the corner of your painting, and if the color spreads too much, wait a little bit more before you continue. Making sure the mixture you're using is not too watery and taking the excess off with your paper towel will help you to control the process. I'll drag some of that ultramarine here to make a dark lavender mix again, and repeating the same process, I'll add the two mountains on the side. I'll start by adding the first mountain. I paint it with the tip of my brush, moving it left to right. Repeat the same process on the other side. I'll also add another mountain in the middle, but this will only serve as an additional visual effect. We'll paint the island and trees separately on dry paper. Now thinking that the water could be a bit darker, so I'll take some of that opera and mix it with the yellow ochre again. I wipe the excess again and I'll just add it here. If you're happy with your lake, you can skip this step. I'll add more dark color here below as well. Now let's blend the two colors. Here I'll try to wipe some of the color to make it more transparent. This could be darker too. I'll drop some pink as well to make it more interesting. Since my paper is still wet, it's a good time to add the reflections. If your paper has started to dry, you can let it dry completely and then wet only the lake area. Allow it to soak up the water for a while and then you can repeat the following steps. For the reflections, I'm preparing a thick mix of permanent brown and ultramarine. Take note of the mixture's thickness and consistency. This ensures that the color won't flow excessively on the wet paper and will mostly stay where I put it. It looks almost black, but if you dilute it with some water, you'll see that it's actually not black. I want to make it a bit colder, so I'll add some more of that ultramarine. I had some white gouache mixed in it, so it gives me this nice muted purple. Let's try to make it darker. I'll add more of the permanent brown and some ultramarine. I need to squeeze some more of it on my palette. Let's see what we've got. I think this one's better. I'll use this mix to paint some vertical lines in downward direction. Some of them are shorter and some are longer. I'll continue adding vertical lines to shape the reflections. I believe this is sufficient, but remember, you can always rewet the entire area and add more if you decide later. Now let's allow the painting to dry completely before moving on to painting the island with the trees. My painting has fully dried, so now I will proceed by painting the darkest elements, which include the two mountains on the sides and the island in the middle. To achieve this, I will utilize the same mixture I used for the reflections. perhaps with a touch of permanent brown. At this point, I am using my round size 2 brush. Beginning with the mountains, the thick consistency of the mixture results in rough edges, which I will then smoothen using a damp brush. This will create a seamless transition between the mountains and the water. Moving on, I will now focus on painting the island in the middle, starting with the trees. Here is how I paint pine trees. Firstly, I create a thin line to represent the tree trunk, followed by small and intentionally messy lines on the sides. The dry brush effect enhances the natural and slightly disheveled appearance. It is crucial to consider the reflections when placing the pine trees, therefore I position them above the longest lines observed in the reflections. I add one pine tree here, another one here, aligning them accordingly. Additionally, you can incorporate various other trees or indistinct shapes, such as bushes or different forms of greenery. Lastly, I proceed to paint the island itself using the dry brush technique. To soften the edge, I employ a damp brush. As an option, I can also intensify the darkness in the reflections by adding some dry brush marks. which can then be blended with a damp brush for a smoother effect. And there you have it, our painting is now complete. I will remove the masking tape. I hope that you are pleased with your painting as well. If you decide to share it on Instagram, please tag me so that I can see your creation. Thank you so much for joining me today and painting along. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye!